Hello, this is Angie Yingst, and you're listening to Centered, grounded conversations about the metaphysical. Welcome to Centered. It's Angie Yingst, and I'm here with a Q&A episode. Yay! I love Q&A episodes. I've always wanted to answer questions, and that's what I get to do for a living. It's very exciting. But this episode, so you know, I'm a little chatty. I am just like that. I think it's my Gemini rising. And so it's not like this is a research heavy episode because the questions were about my work and when I decide to do this or that, and a little bit about Reiki and some interesting, great questions. And I'm really happy to answer questions. So you are always welcome to send me questions at Angie@themoonandstone.com or via my Anchor page, which has a button to record your message. So if you want to hear your voice on here, I would love to hear your voice too. Please feel free to do that. And if you have any questions about episodes you'd love to hear, please send those in too. I love making podcasts for you, so I'm happy to direct them in ways that are most useful to you. So enjoy this episode. So my first question comes from Laura Dominguez. Are you attuned to Reiki? Do you believe in it or not really? Or do you call it something else in shamanism? So I am attuned to Reiki. There are 3 levels in Reiki, and I'm attuned as a Reiki master teacher, which is what RMT stands for. So some people use the initials, I do, on my business card to indicate that I can both teach and give Reiki. So I think this might be a good time to explain what is Reiki, because I think a lot of people have heard about it, but they don't quite know what it is. So Reiki is a gentle, non-invasive energy healing modality that really is there to promote relaxation, reduce stress, help with anxiety through gentle touch. So Reiki practitioners use their hands to deliver energy to the body. You can also use your eyes. You can beam energy. So you don't have to touch the person, but basically you're giving and channeling energy. And we think of it as channeling universal life force energy, the thing, that spirit, that vital force that flows through all things and connects us all. So Reiki was, I should say, rediscovered. That's how Mikao Usui refers to it. So Mikao Usui is a Japanese man who in the early 1900s went to understand this type of healing. There's a lot of cool history with this. He was born in Japan. He was a doctor, and he was very humble. And he started looking and reading all about spirituality and the history of healing. And he was particularly taken with the discussions of Jesus healing people with his hands. And in Buddhism, there's a kind of healing that is worked with that uses hands-on healing techniques by, Buddha and things like this. So he really wanted to kind of understand what was going on. So he went to the Zen monastery and he was studying old sacred books, and he could read the Indian sutras. So he understood that. He was reading Chinese. He was looking at biblical references. And then at some point he goes to this mountain and he decides to just fast and meditate and follow the directions in this formula from a Sanskrit scripture that he found. So he did this for 21 days. And then on the 21st day, he's looking out at the sun when the sun's rising, and then a point of light comes to him, and he basically understands Reiki. He said he's been given Reiki, okay? And this he called it like basically the attunement. And that's why we still call it an attunement, because the idea here is that we pass it. The teacher to the student passes it. And he was also shown different symbols and things like that. So, just to make a long story short, he developed these Reiki clinics in Tokyo and worked on people, and he would help them. And he helped a woman who ended up bringing it to the West. And so that's how Reiki has gotten passed on. So we call them attunements. And what we do is it got formalized through Mrs. Takata. She kind of formalized the process of like different hand positions. And some people just reject that altogether. But the primary thing that kind of runs through all of Reiki is that it's channeled energy. So when you're channeling universal life force energy, not only does the person that you're channeling the energy to get healed, but you get healed as well. So it's like a constant giving. So what does Reiki do? Well, it's not a replacement for medical care. It's a complementary medicine, meaning it complements the other forms of health treatment. So they've done some studies with people with heart conditions or working on like healing heart disease and stuff, and giving Reiki, supporting people who are going through chemotherapy or cancer and using Reiki, and people in hospice using Reiki. All of those things seem to be helped by Reiki and by the gentle touch that comes through Reiki. Okay, so it's supposed to like help relax the body, bring on a meditative state, and then foster healing, because when you're relaxed, you can heal. It promotes self-healing. It relieves tension and pain. So all of that kind of comes together with Reiki. Okay. Now, you asked me, do I believe in it? Yeah, but I don't necessarily think that you need to be attuned to Reiki to give healing. I think touch is a really powerful healing modality. However you touch, like my mother isn't attuned to Reiki, but when my mother holds my hand, I feel safe. I feel connected. And, I do that. That even happens like if I've been ever crying in public, and somebody's like, it's okay. And they put their hand on me, that feels better. So I think like we can use Reiki. And I think what's great about Reiki classes is they teach you things like self-care, how to do Reiki on yourself, how to channel that energy. They teach you about the chakra points and the endocrine system and how it connects with the chakra points. Those things are all very helpful to learn. But again, I don't necessarily think you need to be attuned to Reiki. I think anybody can give healing through gentle touch. Now, the way I've always visualized it and the way I was taught to visualize it is to like bring energy up through the feet from Mother Earth and then bring it down from heaven, Father Sky, through the crown, meet in the heart, and then go out the hands. And I love that visualization because it does intersect nicely with my shamanic practices. So, shamanism is one of those things like, do we call it something different in shamanism? Well, we definitely practice like gentle touch and like, I don't know if you've ever heard of Arvigo Mayan abdominal massage, for example. That's something that has been done by curanderas for a very long time, of like gently touching the abdomen, because in Central and Mexican folk healing, Central American and Mexican, I should say, folk healing, the abdomen is the center, right? So you have to heal the abdomen before you can heal anything else. And so, they did gentle touch in the abdomen for a very, very long time. But for shamanism, we don't call it like, oh, we're going to do shamanic touch or we're going to do Ayurveda abdominal massage. It's that, shamanism is based on a spiritual practice and worldview that is called animism, which is basically the belief that all things have spirit. And because of that, they all embody the essence of Creator or Great Spirit, or however you call it, Mother Earth, Father Sky. And in that way, we're all connected and we're all related to each other. So there are some overlaps, right? There are ways of healing that, use your force. Well, Reiki thinks of you as like the channel. Okay. So it's like Reiki blows through you. And so it never ever is supposed to come from you, which means that as a Reiki practitioner, it shouldn't be draining to give Reiki. It should feel healing. So as much relaxation as you give to someone, they give back, you get it too, because that energy has moved through you. Now, in shamanism, we have this term called the hollow bone. And the hollow bone is this idea that we're like an empty vessel when we're doing shamanic practices or we're doing healing. And the idea is that spirit blows through us. So it works through us. So we're a clear and open channel for great spirit. Now, I think that there's a lot of overlap with Reiki in that way, that it's not coming from you, it's coming from spirit. So shaman are mediators of the spirit world. And so they're always trying to be that empty vessel or that hollow bone that can be blown through. So you have to have really high integrity and impeccability with your word, which is where those 4 agreements come from Don Miguel Ruiz. The idea here is that we are always channeling spirit, okay? And we become the hollow bone. So, in that way, there is some overlap, but it's not exactly the same. But it was a good question. I'm glad you asked it because I could talk about Reiki a little bit. So my next question comes from Allie. How has being a wounded healer informed your practice from one fellow wounded healer to another? So much gratitude for you. Thank you, Allie. I have so much gratitude for you too. So being a wounded healer has informed my practice in so many ways. And I think, where it first came from was being a bereaved mom. I didn't quite think of myself as a healer then, but what I did find was that I was in such desperate grief and sadness and despair. I truly didn't know how I was going to live with the amount of pain that I had. And what happened was that one day I wrote a letter to the newspaper because there's a psychologist who answered questions. And I said, I'm a bereaved mom. My daughter died. She was stillborn. And I wrote everything I was feeling to him. And he answered me in this really beautiful way. It was so, so beautiful. I can't even remember it, but it was gorgeous. It was in the Philadelphia Inquirer in 2009. That's when I wrote the letter. It was a month after my daughter had died. And he actually emailed me and said, would you like to be on my podcast? Like a round table. And I said, sure. And I talked to him about the grief of stillbirth, and what I had been experiencing because I was 38 weeks pregnant when my daughter died. And everybody was expecting me to have my baby. So I was still looking pregnant. My milk came in and everything was happening like I had a baby, but I didn't have a baby. My arms physically ached. Like I needed to hold my baby. Now I had a 20-month-old that I had to get up every day and be present for, but I was really struggling with that part. And I have to say, I don't know how I had the presence to write. I mean, I wrote to some friends. I would send emails, but after that, a girl I know now had listened. And basically, what they told me later is she sent an email to all these bereaved moms and said, we got another one, let's go. And they sent me a bunch of emails and said, you should start a blog and write about your experience. And they said, we do that and we support each other and you can be part of this community. That's how we're getting through it. And, what I found was it was so helpful for someone to just say, I know what you're going through. Not, hey, God needed another angel, or, everything happens for a reason and blah, 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 blah. They just said, I'm walking this path with you. And so, for me, that's what's so valuable to me is that I'm not doing better work or more work than my clients. I am walking beside them. Later, I joined a 12-step recovery program, and, we do the same thing. There's, it's one alcoholic supporting another alcoholic. And what's so valuable about that is that nobody's a therapist or a doctor or a lawyer or a drug and alcohol counselor. They may be in their real life, but when they're in a basement, church basement, they're talking as a fellow alcoholic. And they may understand logically, they may have the knowledge, but in AA we say self-knowledge availed us nothing. So the fact that we knew we were alcoholic didn't stop us from drinking. What stopped us from drinking is realizing we could be of service to another person by helping them get sober, by showing them the way we stay sober. And we do that by humility, by sharing our story, and by making amends to all the people that we've hurt. We understand that we're powerless over whatever our drug is, and that we have to kind of put our faith in something bigger, whatever that is. You don't have to say it's God or, have some religion. For me, recovery and AA helped me unwind all my baggage with religion. God just is, and any time I try to limit that, I minimize it, if that makes sense. So going through AA and realizing I don't have to be an expert in anything else but my story helps me so much in my practice, because, one of the ways that I do healing is by telling people my story, how I got through whatever they're going, whatever similarity. And it's like an annoying habit that I have had my whole life, is just trying to be like, I relate to you. I have had a similar story, which is very diminishing to other people. I mean, I know it's like one of those character defects, but I just want to relate and connect with people. So I have learned how to shut that down a little more, but I also it helps me inform how I'm going to handle my client, right? So when they tell me something, hey, I'm struggling with self-image issues, I think, what would I need? What do I need? I mean, I would need someone to be a friend to me in the way that is most helpful. I wouldn't need them to be like, you're beautiful, don't worry about it. I think you're gorgeous, What I would say generally is, let's think about rewording that, let's think about reframing it, for ourselves, just so we can accept and love ourselves. Because I so many times I teach my clients that they're worthy of healing, that they're worthy of words that we only reserve for our children and our friends. We can be our own parent and we can be our own friend. And so being a wounded healer helps me not come at it academically, but come at it as an equal. So I think, being a wounded healer is invaluable, and it's invaluable to remember, because at least in our community, and I know, Allie, you're a therapist and you have a little different background, but in the energy healing community, we have people who also, don't necessarily look at their own wounds while they're helping others. And I think that's where this idea of being the wounded healer is valuable, because everyone is a wounded person. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you've had the most blessed life. We all have been wounded because we're human, and human is to suffer. It's the first noble truth of Buddhism. Life is suffering, because the attachment to our humanness creates suffering. So we're all wounded. And if you don't accept the fact that you're a wounded healer, there's some work to do around that. There's work to do around looking at your wounds, seeing how they've played out, and how they can come out, through your work. So, I feel like I rambled a lot, and I hope I answered that question. I think the biggest thing, just to sum up, is to walk as an equal with my clients. My next question is from Sharon Muzio, my love, my bestie, my roommate. She said, when you're offering a reading and intuitively sense a person is in a very bad relationship, what is the most professional way to deliver this information? I don't think that being in a very bad relationship will come as a surprise to someone who's in a very bad relationship. So what I would say is, I'm like looking at these cards, and it seems like your relationship can be really challenging at times. Do you want to tell me anything about that? Or would you like me to tell you what I see here and just kind of ask permission if they actually want the truth? I would point out some things that I'm seeing. And then I would also point out what the best way forward is for that. So it isn't that I would necessarily say, like, you're in a shitty relationship and you need to get out. But I think I would just say, like, this relationship looks pretty challenging, and I'm looking at those cards that show that, like the 5 of Swords, for example, or some of those abusive cards, like the 8 of Swords, where she feels trapped. In that one, you can say, like, do you feel safe in that relationship? Emotionally safe. If I'm seeing some cards that are representing the other person, say the King of Swords reversed, or the Queen of Swords reversed, or the King of Wands or the Queen of Wands reversed, those can be challenging people. I mean, all of the court cards reversed can be challenging, but those in particular can be the fire and the fire. Reversed fire people tend to fly off the handle. They scream and yell and throw things and shit like that. Because think of how fire is when it's out of control. It's like all over the place, right? Swords, when it's out of control, when it gets reversed, becomes more cutting, okay? So they usually are sarcastic, verbally abusive, like emotionally manipulative. If, the cups reverse are usually alcoholics or some kind of drug addict or emotionally volatile, right? Like they're screaming and crying and threatening to hurt themselves. Okay. Whereas when you get a pentacle reversed, that's a very controlling person, someone who's stubborn, who won't listen to anyone else. So if you're seeing a lot of these kind of cards around a relationship question, what you can do is kind of describe that. Just say, like, oh, I see this King of Swords here, and it's coming in reverse, meaning this person is challenging right now. Okay, they are probably being pretty sarcastic, cutting with their tongue, like kind of cutting you down with words. They are trying to outthink you and outlogic you, so they're more in their head than their heart. Okay. And in that way, that's deceptive for them, because a lot of times our head leads us astray, right? We think we're the smartest person in the room. So, I would just kind of describe the person and let them make the connection between that and their partner. And you can say, how I see this affecting you is, it feels a little like a trap, So what I do and what I do with my tarot readings is I am someone who calls them like spiritual counseling sessions. So what I do is I ask them questions then. So do you want to talk about that relationship? What do you want to know in particular about this relationship? And, I kind of like ask those leading questions for them to like open up and really share. And then we can brainstorm some approaches to it. Like maybe, if they're like, yeah, that, I'm in this relationship and he doesn't like approve of me doing any of this spiritual stuff. And he is very sarcastic about it. And he won't let me go and pursue this training I want to do or something like that. You might say, okay, well, let's brainstorm. Let's pull some cards to figure out how we can talk to him. What would be the best approach, to kind of talk about this. And, you might be seeing like a lot of like get out of the relationship cards. And that's something like you can just ask, have you ever considered leaving this relationship? How does that feel to you? So instead of saying you need to get out, honey, you just ask them what they're feeling. Just saying, because that right now, if nothing changes and everything goes the way it's going, you're going to still get what you're getting, like nothing changes if nothing changes. So then, what I would say is, I keep seeing these cards of moving on. And so I wonder if this is a time to consider whether or not this is the best relationship for you. So, most people come because it's almost like they want permission to leave. And not that I say you should leave your relationship ever, but I will, kind of just say it's looking like this relationship is going to stay the same. So I hope that helped. So the next questions, I'm going to kind of stay on that tarot thread, is from Tammy Rutland. She says, how does tarot differ from oracle? Maybe a little info on each of them. And then Angela said, tarot versus oracle, when to use one versus the other. So I'm going to kind of wrap it up and answer both those questions at the same time. So tarot is a deck of cards. There's 78 cards. They're pretty much the same structure for most decks. Okay. I'm not saying they all mean the same thing, but most decks are based on this structure of 78 cards. So 56 of them are minor arcana and 22 are major arcana. The 56 can kind of be equated to playing cards, right? There's 4 suits. Now, the court in playing cards are the Jack, the Queen, and the King. In the tarot, it's the Page, the Knight, the Queen, and the King. So you have one more. That makes 56 versus 52. So tarot stays in that structure. And in that way, you can learn the language of tarot. And that's what most people study. So, I teach with the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which was created in 1909. I think it was printed, or 1901 or something like that. My brain isn't working very well, but that deck was certainly not the first deck. It was a first commercially produced deck that kind of like exploded. And it didn't explode at the time, it exploded later. And in that way, other tarot decks were based on this Rider-Waite-Smith deck, all the ones in the 20th century pretty much. Prior to that, tarot was something that was used in, it was started, we think, in the 14th century in Italy as a parlor game. So it was a actual game that people played. It wasn't a divination practice. But as time went on, people started using it for divination as kind of like a, hey, you want me to read your future kind of thing, and pull these cards out. Now, when the cards started, they were hand painted. And so families would ask a artist to hand paint the cards. So those early decks are really cool because they're all a little different. And so the characters on the major arcana would be painted based on the family that had hired them, which is really cool. It wasn't really until the 1700s that an actual divination deck was put out in France. So we know it probably was used for divination before that, but an actual deck wasn't published until later. And that deck is different. That has like 44 cards, I believe. So tarot, anyway, is a language. And most people that study tarot study these elements, the 4 suits, the major arcana, and they can pretty much read those cards no matter what deck they are. There's like the 4 of Cups has a connection and a meaning. Okay. And so prior to the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, again, published in the early 20th century, the pips, or the numbered cards, like the 1 through 10s, the 8s through 10s of the playing cards, for example, those just had, like, if it was the 4 of cups, it would just have 4 cups on it. If it was the 4 of swords, it would just have 4 swords on it. It would just look like a playing card deck. And Pamela Coleman Smith and Arthur Waite, they basically decided to paint the pips, and they painted stories on the pips so that you could understand what was happening in the tarot. So it was like, if you just got 4 cups, you could say like, oh, 4 people are coming over and you're going to have an emotional thing. The 4 of cups, now we can kind of have a different meaning with it. Okay. So because there's a story being told, and then every other deck in the 20th century kind of riffs on that. Okay. Because she created this image. So if you're seeing like a fairy one, there's maybe 4 dewdrops instead of cups. It just depends on whatever the theme of the tarot cards are. And I think that's what gets a little confusing for people with tarot and oracle, because oracle decks are decks of cards that are meant to be read individually. Okay. You don't need to have a background and study the language of tarot to pick up an oracle deck and read it. Okay. And oracle decks tend to be based on whatever the author or writer wants it to be based on. So there's angel oracles, or ascended master or goddess oracles, or animal oracles, or plant oracles. So what they're doing is like bringing forth messages in the card, and the message is contained in the card. So you don't have to study and memorize the messages like you do with tarot. Tarot, because it's this language and this complex language, there often isn't a huge amount of description with it. It's kind of, that's why there's so many tarot books, because everybody interprets them differently. And Arthur Waite, who like basically codified that tarot 78 card thing, and he made that deck and got published by Rider, and then he made the book with it. And the book is so not great. It often doesn't match the picture, because he was kind of an a-hole with Pamela Coleman Smith. And anyway, that is a long story. I'd love to do something on Pamela Coleman Smith at some point, because she is freaking amazing, and she got paid nothing to do these. I mean, just like, he did not pay her, he didn't compensate her, and he belittled her work for, he's just such an ass. Maybe because I really relate to Pamela Coleman Smith, and Sharon, my bestie right now, is really obsessed with Pamela Coleman Smith's story, because she is just a fascinating character. She was a lesbian. She was biracial. She was also bicultural. She was Black and American, but she lived in England and she lived in the United States. So she would travel back and forth, and she was an artist, obviously, since she painted the deck, but she was a set designer and a painter, and she's just incredible. Someone needs to do her story. Geez. And she basically died penniless because, they just didn't pay women, especially artists, that much money. So oracle decks, getting back to the original question, hello ADHD, oracle decks, on the other hand, are created by someone who wants to connect with something like the Plant Nation, or, the Stone People, or whatever it is. I have so many oracle decks. It's ridiculous. And each one, it's great to use oracle decks like for your own personal meditation. I think it's great to match it with the energy that you want. So that's a lot of how I use it. I use them to kind of enhance my journey work or my meditation work. I pull one and then read it for like answering a question for the day. And what I do is I read the book. I don't always use my intuition, though you can with oracle decks. You can kind of look at the picture and the message on it. They usually have their messages on the top of it. It'll say like I'm trying to think of a good oracle. Let me pull an oracle deck out. Hold, please. So 2 decks I've been using lately, and I just wanted them in front of me, is the Earthcraft Oracle, and it's by Juliet Diaz and Lorraine Anderson. And what it is, it's a guide for sacred healing. Okay, so Juliet Diaz is a witch. She's Latina. And so you would like shuffle and then pull one. Now these are great because they offer you rituals. So I just pulled 13, the inner healer. So it has a word on, and that alone gives me something. Okay, my inner healer is activated, and that's important. And the picture is a woman holding the earth, and the earth is holding like kind of a glowing ball, and there's a plant in it. So I'm assuming she's giving Reiki. And then you look in the book, and it says, for the inner healer, you have received an invitation to follow the path of the healer and to choose to do your own inner work required to turn your pain into medicine. That's literally my philosophy. I'm turning my wounds into medicine. And then it goes on and on. It has a spell that you can do to kind of work with that energy. Another deck I have, which is another witchy deck here, is by Laura Tempest Zakroff, called The Anatomy of a Witch Oracle. And I like this one too. This is another witchy one. And if I pull one, I get bless. And it shows a woman or hands holding a bowl and fire and smoke and water's in the bowl and plants are coming out. And so that one is called bless. And then when I go to the book says, 2 hands offer forth a bowl of swirling water, representing the elemental water that is being infused with the elements of earth, fire, and air. And a sense of spirit fills the air, adding intention and focus to the brew. What to consider. To bless is to acknowledge the wonder of the world and our relationship with it. When we concentrate items for ritual and magic, we recognize their sacred importance. So it has some beautiful words about gratitude and whatnot. So when do you use one versus the other? Well, I do tarot readings. I find oracle readings a little difficult, but what I do is I combine tarot and oracle together, but most people use oracle as like a guidance for the day, just like you would when you pull a tarot card. You can use an oracle card. Oracle cards tend to be pretty gentle for the most part, and kind of give you some concrete ways to move forward. If I were to use like an animal oracle, which I do for all of my monthly readings, I would use that as like, okay, today I'm going to be working with, and I pull an animal card. Okay, I'm working with sea turtle, which is what we're working with this month in my membership group. Okay, what does that mean? It means I'm going to kind of embody that wisdom of the turtle and go with the flow and realize like when I feel out of sync with my surroundings, I've formed a family where I flow and where I can move easily. So I may like incorporate that message throughout the day. But with tarot readings, like you get a little more specific, you get some more information. A lot of people use both. Like I said, when I do tarot readings, I'll bring an oracle card to answer clarifying questions. So like give me an overview of the spiritual part of this. I always use my mystical shaman deck. And then I created a deck for myself to fill a hole and a need that I had for my tarot reading. So, I think learning one or the other, you could do both. Most people who like cards like cards. I love cards, so I tend to have a lot of decks and use a lot of decks and use them for different things. So, for example, when I'm trying to figure out, like, I have all these things to work on. What should I focus on right now? I'll pull like an oracle card, or if I want to know what to put on my altar, I might pull an oracle card of crystals, and then start there and build around whatever crystal came up. So I hope that helps, and I answered your question. Thanks for listening to Centered with me, Angie Yingst. If you'd like to send me a question or comment about this show or any shows, you can send them to Angie@themoonandstone.com.